In the 1830s, people recognized they had to move west. And these were hardship times in moving west because they'd never done this before. There was nothing there. There was no home, no building, nothing. You had to start from scratch. No matter what you had in grain, whether you had wheat or whether you had corn, you had to figure out how to make it so you could cook it. And so in corn, it was much more difficult. Some of it called it a saddle mill, and they had a bowl like this and a saddle rock right on the top of it, and they'd pound it on there. And any way you looked at corn was difficult because corn kernels were very hard. They took a lot of muscle and time to crunch. As people learned how to harvest, it required you weren't going to sit in your backyard and crush that grain. You needed somebody or some machine to do it. So this is where the mills started.
In 1837, Henry Rowe of Lockridge Township erected a treadmill for grinding grain. Customers would bring their grain, put their own horses on the tread, they'd pay a small fee for use, and the treadmill would produce a coarse but edible product. That same year, John Troxell built a mill on Cedar Creek, just 1 mile southwest of Fairfield. 1 year later, Troxell's mill was destroyed by flood. But as time went on, more grist and flour mills began to crop up in neighborhoods in and around Fairfield.
The grist mill was always very central part of the community during those first early years of the settlement. Without it, you didn't eat. Grist is a generic term for anything that passes through a mill. When it goes through its first operation and gets ground up even in the slightest, it stops being grain and becomes grist until it turns into a finished product.
Most of the mills were started between 1838 and 50. You will see a lot of mills that became active for 2 or 3 years and disappeared because the creek was up, the creek was down, the creek was up, the creek was down, or the creek would take away their whole program, see? So building the mills fit their needs. Anytime they needed a need on any little creek or any little area to shorten their distance down so they don't have to travel this far, they travel this far, that was an asset. If that mill lasted 3-5 years, that was an asset because look what it saved them. It got them down to the narrowness. And so in that category, they saved a lot of time and money. So the mill got washed out, that's okay. We figured it out, we can go 10 miles further. There were 1,000 mills in Iowa. Some of those existed a year, some 10 years, some 50 years. Whatever was necessary and the money able to keep them up and the people trained to work in them.
Farmers in that period picked their corn by hand. And when you got it here, you dumped it into the corn sheller, which is in the back corner of the building, and went down a chute into the shelling machine, which is in the basement. And then the shelled corn went up a bucket elevator to the second floor, went through a cleaning machine, and then it dropped down into a big storage bin. And then the miller regulated the feed into that 3-roller mill. Bread flour and its quality was totally driven by the housewives of the period. Back during the early settlement period, there's a story was told by a man. He said when he was a young boy, his family moved from Pennsylvania to down by Keosauqua, Iowa. And they threshed their grain right on the bare ground. Consequently, he said a good part of Iowa topsoil was incorporated into the grain father took to the grist mill. One night at supper, Mom pointed at Dad with her fork and she said, "Damn it, Father, we're eating our farm 1 loaf of bread at a time." So, that was her way of demanding he go to a better grist mill and get better flour the next time he went to the mill.
The miller had he was the captain of the ship. If you didn't have the money necessary, the miller said, okay, we'll give you 1 grain, looks like we're going to have 20 bushel. I'm going to keep 2 bushel. I'm going to keep 2 bushel in my basket for doing your grind. So yes, no money. He kept 2 of your bushel and you went home with 18 bushel.
Probably no mills along the rivers or creeks have served more people in Jefferson County than the mills at Merrimack, just within the county line between Jefferson and Henry County. Merrimack was in the early days known as Deedsville, deriving its name from early entrepreneur Silas Deeds. In 1849, Deeds built the first dam there on the Chautauqua, or Skunk River, and a sawmill was set up on the west side in 1850. The high water of 1851 washed away the entire mill. Undaunted, Mr. Deeds sanded out another frame, and the Deedsville flour mill was finished in 1853. This mill had 4 pairs of burrs, 3 for flour and 1 for cornmeal. It was later sold and renamed Merrimack Mills, and the town name changed to Merrimack. By then, it had a grist mill, flour mill, carding mill, sawmill, and general store connected together like a mini mall of today. In 1895, Peter Saltzman bought the entire business, and Superlative Roller Mills was painted on the building. He continued grinding flour there until 1903, when all the small flour mills along the rivers around Jefferson County became unprofitable. Eventually, shipping got easier and less expensive. Mills started getting bigger and bigger and located further apart, and the local grist and flour mills disappeared from the landscape. The one remaining remnant of the Mills of Jefferson County lies at the top of the Saltzman machine shed, where you can still see parts of the wrought iron cupola just as it stood in 1850.